And they really need to join forces because the opposition is starting to mount, especially back east. Those who are opposed to women's suffrage have started to join forces a lot more. Men and women are involved in the suffrage movement. Men and women are both involved in the anti-suffrage movement as well. And they're pulling up reasons why women shouldn't get the right to vote. It's going to ruin them. That's really what it comes down to. Politics is a dirty business. It's going to just corrupt women and ruin everything. We just can't allow that. So into this steps Alice Paul. And I warn you, I love her a lot. I couldn't find my Alice Paul button. I own like 50 buttons, so I can never find anything. And it's usually a bet for those of you who know me, how easily and smoothly I can slip Elvis into a conversation. This isn't even going to be subtle, but it's our goal. We've canonized Elvis in our house, so Alice Paul is next. She's nodding. Just pitying my family. They live with this every day. Uh-oh, it went back again. No. This is the end. See how much...
Now your daughter's laughing because she doesn't do much better of a job.
Oh, she's laughing over Elvis, I'm guessing.
No.
Sorry.
So lame.
That's Deborah. She's just Deborah. All right, so this is Alice Paul.
Okay.
I'm going to give you a little bit of background on her. She's born in 1885. Her birthday is actually just 2 days before Elvis's, too, so there's just some trivia, and 50 years. But they died the same year, which I find really weird. So she's born in 1885. She's a Quaker, and that's also important. She's raised in a family that values protest, but values peaceful protest. They also value education. And they taught her from the very beginning. Her mother and father both really emphasized the idea of equal rights. And this is, last part of the 19th century, early part of the 20th century. She goes to college. She was actually an athlete in college, and I think there's a lot of things we can say about the importance of encouraging young girls and young women to play sports and what it can do for them. When she graduated, she becomes involved in the settlement house movement. Essentially, she's a social worker. We didn't have that term then. She decides to go to England, where the settlement house movement began, and while she's doing that simultaneously, she was working on her PhD. She got her doctorate in 1911, and if you just did your math on that, she was 26 years old when she got her PhD in sociology. There's a reason we love her in our house. While she's in England, though, she sees what they're doing for women's suffrage. And their methods are very different than what women were doing back in the United States, where things were, writing petitions, being very polite about the state by state. In England, I have just no power in my own house, just to let everyone know. I don't know who this child is. Who would bring a kid in an event like this?
Especially a female.
I know. They're heckling members of parliament. They're throwing bricks through windows. Their motto was deeds, not words. Words, not going to do it. We need to actually have action. And Alice Paul is watching all this, and she gets involved in it, and she's a Quaker. Later accounts say that she broke herself about 48 windows. She's arrested. She meets this woman who turns out to be one of her closest friends, Lucy Burns, who's also an American. They're both arrested a few times together. They start talking about, what can we do back home? How are we going to move things along back home? They move back to the United States in 1912, and they've joined NASA, and they go before Cat and others and say, we want to do something big. We need a federal amendment. They don't really want to deal with Alice Paul and Lucy Burns, so they say, do something, whatever you want. They say, we're going to have a women's march on DC. So we're not that original for all of you who participated, but we're upholding tradition is what we did. They scheduled this march to coincide with the presidential inauguration. Woodrow Wilson won the election in November of 1912, and inaugurations used to happen on March 4th. They moved them up to January. March 4th. So they set it for March 3rd, the day before. There's a few reasons for that. They wanted to welcome the new president and make sure suffrage was on his radar from day one. They also knew that a lot of people would be in town. They knew the press would be in town. They knew a lot of people would travel from all over. So they scheduled this. You can see a lot of the women's suffrage movement in this. The women's colors are there, purple. for loyalty and steadfastness to a cause. Gold is supposed to be like a guiding light, guiding them in the trueness of their purpose, and white for purity. So they set this up. The march was actually led by Inez Milholland. She was a lawyer and an activist. They dressed her in Greek robes. She's supposed to look like a powerful warrior to kick off this march. And these are just really powerful images. So this is 1913. People from all over the United States came, and they went down Pennsylvania just for the imagery of what was going to be behind them. 8,000 women participated in this march. So think about, technology is not where we are today. Communication, transportation. You got 8,000 women from all over the United States. And they had all sorts of different things. It wasn't just the march. They had little plays and tableaus set up along the way. This took a lot of planning. There were 26 floats, 10 separate marching bands, and 6 chariots in this whole march. And again, women from all over the nation, from all different backgrounds, are coming to participate in this march. And things go all right for a little bit. And there's a lot of spectators there. And then the spectators start to get a little bit more rowdy, and it turns out they're not all that supportive. And it starts out just with some taunts and with some insults, yelling things at them, and then it turns violent, and they start throwing things at the protesters. And the cops walk away. One woman, she was actually a congressman's wife, turned to a police officer and said, "Aren't you going to help us?" And he said, "If my wife was where you were, I'd knock her head in." So it turns violent. It actually finished. The march still finished. They made it all the way through, but people did get hurt. About 200 people were taken to the hospital for minor injuries, which this is awful. It's not as bad as it could have been. What happens though as a result is that newspapers cover it. It's front page news everywhere, headlines galore. And this looks bad, where women are being attacked for a silent, semi-silent, peaceful protest. It gets some sympathy for them. And this is what President Wilson sees on his first day as he's inaugurated. He sees these headlines.
I'm looking for the headlines.
I couldn't find any, sorry. This was... They existed, just trust me. Trust the historian. We don't alter information. I'm going to have you keep going. Wilson is sworn in the next day. He's inaugurated the next day, and Wilson is a big believer in democracy. He's a big supporter of democracy, and he's very proud of the United States. And he talks about this in his inauguration, what a great job that we've done building things up. Women's suffrage leaders, including Alice Paul, met with him in his first 2 weeks and said, "You love democracy? Here's half your population." And he said, "Oh, you know, I'm a Democrat, and the Democratic Party doesn't support it, so I can't really support it either yet." And Alice Paul was always really good at calling him on his hypocrisy. And as you read this quotation from her, it's echoing what Abigail Adams had said 140 years before. We're not a democracy. Anything that you enact, any legislation, any taxation, we didn't have a say in this. She and Nassau will butt heads a few different times over the federal amendment versus state by state. And in 1916, Alice Paul says, "You know, I'm going to do my own thing." She starts her own political party, the National Women's Party, single issue party. It was all about women's suffrage. And this is where she throws all of her attention for the next few years. Especially as things are, sorry.